So in our previous section, we looked at surpluses and shortages based on the supply curve and the demand curve and the intersection, and the overall goal being to reach equilibrium. So just a quick review before we go into the next section of disequilibrium for chapter 6-3. Let's just do a quick review of what we covered in 6-2 here. So first of all, we're looking at a surplus. So in red we have our demand curve, and the blue curve is the supply curve. Supply upward sloping left to right, and the demand downward sloping left to right. Price is always on the y-axis, and then the quantity supplied over here on the x-axis. And so in this particular situation demonstrating a surplus, we're showing the price at $25 and what occurs at that price. So at a price of $25, the supply is pretty high at 11. But the demand at that high price, remembering the law of demand, higher prices, lower demand, so the demand is low here at 1. And that creates this area between these curves, this triangle here, as a surplus of 10, and the 10 calculated as 11 minus 1. And so that is the area or the surplus that is created. So if you were to shade this in, a lot of you shaded in everything up above here, but we wanted to specifically show a particular surplus at a price, in this example, at $25. And so you would just shade in this area here, this area of surplus, surplus of 10. So let's take a look now at a shortage. So here's the shortage. Now remember, a shortage occurs when the demand exceeds the supply, whereas before we had the supply exceeding the demand, or the supply was greater than the demand. And then here now with the shortage we have the demand is greater than the supply. So now the price is lower at $10. What occurs? Well, there's a shortage because the demand is at 10, but the supply is only at 3. Suppliers are not interested in supplying that much merchandise at this low price. And so it creates a shortage of 7. 10 minus 3 equals 7. And so then you shade in this area here. And so then what has to happen in these situations is that when there's a shortage, then the price has to increase in order to get to equilibrium. Equilibrium being that point where we previously said that the market clears. Everybody who wants to buy the product at a particular price gets the product because the suppliers are willing to supply it at that particular price. So with a shortage, the price has to increase. With a surplus, in order to get rid of it or to clear the market, we need to lower the price to entice or encourage more people to buy it until we reach that agreement point of equilibrium. So that's a quick review of what we covered in 6-2. But now we're going to move on and look what happens if the government steps in and artificially sets either a price above the equilibrium or below the equilibrium. And so we're going to explore what happens when that occurs.
Economists call this idea the government setting prices price controls. Now there's two types, and we're going to look at both of them in the thought bubble.
When the government sets a maximum price for a specific good or service, that's a price ceiling. Let's say the government forced gas stations to charge $1 per gallon for gas. This might seem like a good idea, right? Mandated lower gas prices mean we all benefit. Not really. Society is actually made worse off. When the gas prices fall, consumers will want to buy more, but producers will no longer find it profitable to sell gas. The lower price will decrease the amount of gasoline produced, and we've got a shortage.
Okay, well let's review that. I love Crash Course, but sometimes they fly. It is a crash course indeed. Let's just take a quick review of that last minute barrage there of price ceiling. So we know what the equilibrium price is, and so the Crash Course people there are talking about the price of gasoline. So the equilibrium price in this example is at $3 a gallon. There's the equilibrium price. Clears the market of all the gasoline. Those who want to get it, those who want to produce it, produce it. Now the government steps in, and in an effort of good intention to try to help us out, we're going to put a price ceiling, a price from which it would be the highest price that companies would be allowed to charge for gasoline. That's why it's called a ceiling. Can't go above it. Can go anywhere below it, but not above it. So in this particular example here, we're looking at the equilibrium price at $3, but government stepping in and saying, well, it's too expensive for everybody. Let's be nice and lower the price and make it a legal price. Price control, $1. Well, what will happen in the marketplace? Well, there'll be a lot of demand for that gasoline. It's only $1 a gallon. But will the suppliers want to supply that much gasoline? And the answer is no. And so if the demand is greater than the supply because of this ceiling, then all of this here is going to be the shortage. Now, we don't have any quantities down here, but this area here from our previous discussion, we know that below the equilibrium price, there's going to be a shortage. So a price ceiling occurs when the government steps in to control the maximum price that can be charged for a product, or the highest price that can be charged.
When the gas prices fall, consumers will want to buy more, but producers will no longer find it profitable to sell gas. The lower price will decrease the amount of gasoline produced, and we've got a shortage. In terms of actually helping consumers and producers, the vast majority of economists consider price controls counterproductive. But there is one notable exception: minimum wage. The minimum wage is a really complex issue that we're going to address in a future video.
Assume that the equilibrium price for gas is $3 and the government sets a price ceiling here at only $1. At that low price, consumers will want to buy more, so the quantity demanded is going to be here. The producers have less incentive to produce gas, so they're going to make less, so the quantity supplied is right here. The end result is that the quantity bought and sold is going to fall, resulting in a shortage. The amount of gas society wants is where supply meets demand. Producing any quantity less or more than that will result in something that economists call deadweight loss. So the quantity produced at the price ceiling is not allocatively efficient. We're not producing enough. The lower the price ceiling, the more the deadweight loss and inefficiency. Keep in mind that the price ceiling only has an effect in the market when it's below the equilibrium price. The price ceiling only has an effect in the market when it's below the equilibrium price. The price ceiling only has an effect in the market when it's below the equilibrium price. The price ceiling only has an effect in the market when it's below the equilibrium price.
Many countries still use price ceilings. Take Venezuela. In recent years, they've been experiencing high inflation, so the government decided to impose price controls on consumer products like basic foods, medicine, and toilet paper. But the new price is so low relative to the cost of production that farmers and factories can't make money. As a result, they've reduced or halted production of many goods, causing long lines, shortages, and empty shelves. Rent control is another type of price ceiling. Many cities, including New York and San Francisco, put a cap on monthly rent for some apartments. Again, the idea is to increase affordability for tenants, which enables long-term tenants to stay in their homes when real estate prices rise. Meanwhile, the lower rent discourages renovation and construction, reducing the quantity supplied. The result is a shortage of apartments, with landlords that have few incentives to maintain their buildings or be responsive to their tenants' needs. Economists are not at all split on rent control. Pretty much all of them think that price ceilings on rent reduce the quantity and quality of the housing that's available.
All right there, so you have it. A discussion and a review of a price ceiling, situation of price control that creates something that we call disequilibrium. And then we had another term that came up there in that last section of Crash Course, deadweight loss. And so that was this area here under the equilibrium where there is a shortage because there's high demand, but there's just no product available. And so the deadweight loss is that products that could have been sold at a particular price are not being produced and not being sold. So it's putting a big drain on the economy. So next up, you are going to create your own supply and demand curve showing the equilibrium price and indicating a price ceiling. And so you can grab that off of Google Classroom. It's going to look like this. Disequilibrium, schedule, graph, and discussion. Suppose the government became concerned about the high price of running shoes and imposed a price ceiling of $40 per pair. Given the data in the demand and supply schedule below, what would the results of such a regulation be or a price control? Why would many consumers and producers be upset with this result? So what you're going to do is construct a graph that demonstrates the result of such a price control or regulation and indicate all significant areas, points on your graph relevant to this discussion. Now what does that mean? That means you're going to make it look like this. So there's your model right there. Except of course your numbers are going to be down here on the x-axis as far as the quantity supplied, and then the price. And so you'll graph all of that right over here. And so it's a good idea, as we've talked about before, is try to use as much of this graph as possible. So take a look at quantity supplied. So you're going to go from 0, the maximum is going to be 100, and so you could probably skip at least every other one of these marks here. So you could probably do something like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and put 100 out here. You could do that. And then you're going to want to keep in mind that you're also going to put the quantity demanded on the same axis, on the x-axis. So, which is no problem because you've already counted from 20 to 100, and so you're also going to use that same scale when you plot the points for quantity demanded. We're just putting them on the same chart. So don't be confused by that. Quantity supplied, quantity demanded, it's the same scale on the same chart. Ask me questions if you're unsure about that. And then the range of your prices is from 0 to 70. So you could probably go by, skip every other one and put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and that would use a good area of the chart. You could try something else if you want to try to use more of that. But go ahead and the first step would be to graph this information, quantity demanded, quantity supplied, and then label it as we looked at from the video, showing all of these important components of your supply and demand graph. And then go ahead and do the discussion, and you can put that right down in this area here. And so one of the main questions you want to answer is, what would the effect of this be, and why? Why would people or consumers be unhappy with this situation? And so after you spend some time on that, and then we'll talk about that in class. And the crash course video gave you some hints about that too, in the fact that society is not better off. You just want to be able to describe why we're not better off when we do something like this price ceiling.